All right. So obviously one of our motivations is to help fill that position, but it's really not my principal reason for being. My principal reason is I have a lot of people that come into my office looking for jobs, just like yourselves, and maybe they even apply for jobs on USA Jobs. They're just not getting referred and picked up. And then we have a conversation with them, and come to find out they have an immense amount of qualifications for whatever job they were applying for. Unfortunately, they did not reflect it in their resume, and it really uh, irritates us in that regard there, especially when you're dealing with young military spouses who, they're accompanying their husband or wife, whatever, here, and they want a job and they just can't break that code. And we know up here it's a little bit of cost of living and everything else a little high, and so that second income for them really would be helpful. So we came up with this seminar to help break the code. So that's what it is. One, I'm going to give you a real brief introduction to the federal government and the types of civilian jobs we have. And then we're going to shift into how we qualify people for it. And then that'll be including a little bit of USA Jobs and then some resume stuff here. So, but some of it, again, it's a 90-minute presentation and we're cramming into an hour. So with that in mind there, let's just go forward here. I tried this earlier. Okay. So here, is that the eye? That's all right. I can do page down. Maybe I won't be. Yeah, locked up. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. This is one of those slides I'm going to skip over real briefly here. But really, when it comes to dealing with folks, our business here is really knowing what kind of job you want. So that's why I'll ask most of you there, what kind of job are you looking for there? Along with that, as you're proceeding towards trying to get that job, is being realistic in your expectations. And one thing I always like to share is this page here. So, because years ago, I did a briefing with Alaska Business Week, and we were talking to a bunch of folks that were hopefully going to graduate and get jobs. And we were asking them about their expected pay rate for their job, and it just happened to be an engineer. And this young kid sat there and said, "Well, I expect to be making about $36 an hour." And I was just tickled pink, because if I am an employer and I go out there and look at what the going rate is for an engineer, on average, they're $63 an hour. I could almost hire two of those guys for the price of one. And so what we encourage folks to do is whatever job you're looking for, go out to the Department of Labor website there. You can plug in whatever occupation it is. It'll give you a profile as to what's the expectations as far as that occupation. Is it growing? Is it dying? What's the average number of people that's going to be competing for a typical application? And then obviously important things as far as your pay rates and all that stuff there. So when you go into the interview, you're fully prepared to negotiate whatever that starting salary is there. So that's all I'm going to say. I could say a lot more, but that'll be the case. I also talk about having a 5-year plan, because when we deal with folks here, what kind of job are you looking for? And usually get that deer in headlight look there. I just want something that pays the bills. But our question always is, especially because we're more career-oriented versus giving people jobs, is where you see yourself in 5 years, and how does this job that you're searching for, trying to get, how does that play into that 5-year plan? This just happens to be a very simple plan. My son's an electrical engineer, so he graduated from here, and this was him graduating from school and where he wanted to be in 5 years from these different perspectives here. So again, another slide I'm not going to beat to death. It's always nice to have a plan and have some decision points along the way. All right, federal service. So when we encourage folks to become a federal employee, we're not asking you to be a military member, meaning that you're not going to wear a uniform, you're not going to carry a gun, and you're not going to deploy. Generally, that's the case there. All right. There are some civilian jobs where you may be forward deployed, An example of that, some of our new IT positions with the F-35. When the F-35 deploys forward, they need IT systems. So we may have to take some of our civilians, push them forward, get them the F-35 situated, and then they come back home. Are they going to carry guns? No. They're civilians, typically civilians, unless you're some special forces kind of guy or whatever, you're not going to carry weapons. You may wear a uniform just to blend in with folks there, or you may not. But generally speaking, you're not carrying a weapon, you're not deploying, what have you, and you are going to take a note. So you are not a contractor as well. So, all right. So we typically have two different bunches or batches of jobs. One of the jobs is what I call white collar here, and the reason it's white collar is, again, it's this kind of thing here. They typically are either professional, administrative, or technical. So in those cases there, they all fall under what we call the general services pay schedule here. And so each one of those jobs out there has a prefix of GS for that pay table, and then a 4-digit job series code. And you can go out to the office of opm.gov website, plug this in, and it'll give you a very detailed explanation of what it is, along with qualifications as far as education, experience, all those kinds of things for the different grades. In this case here, you notice that some of these are highlighted in yellow. And the reason is because, so the president, the executive branch oversees all of the hiring for federal employees. His head HR is the Office of Personnel Management. They sit there and have to execute by law, very specifically, how to hire people. It's codified in law and they have to abide by that. But in some cases, there's some jobs that are just hard to fill. Maybe it's the location, maybe it's just the demand, supply and demand of the career field, whatever. So OPM has actually given us special authority to deviate from the law and use this normal traditional, what we call the traditional process as far as recruiting goes, and go with what we call the direct hire process. In very simple terms, I gave you vacancy lists. One of the lists there at the very top, it says local direct hire list. Those are all the ones that have this special provision to be hired. And I'll talk about what that is here shortly. But the other one is traditional. And what that really means is we're going to use USA Jobs as our primary medium for recruiting. But in this case here, so if you can imagine any kind of job that a small little city would need to maintain itself, then we probably have that job. So that's the case there. All right. How do they get paid? So each one of those jobs, they have a position description. That position description has gone through somebody in the personnel world and classified it using the standards that OPM has established. Maybe based upon how technical it is, how broad, there's the scope or the impact of it is, all those kinds of things there, but they will give it a rating, GS 1 through 15. So you can sit there and have, I'll give you an example, a resource or a budget analyst typically is going to be a GS 9. So in this case here, this pay scale, how it works is when they first start out, they're going to have, this is base pay and then overtime. So their hourly rate is 27 bucks an hour. Every year for the first 4 years, they're going to get a pay increase. So they go from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. After that, then it's every 2 years. And then at their 8th year, it'll be every 3 years. So if someone stayed in a GS9 position for 20 years, at the end of that 20 years, they'd be in step 10. That's how that works there. So, and oh, by the way, if you get promoted, change jobs, or whatever the case may be, you will never lose pay. You will always experience at least a 4% increase in pay, no matter where it is. All right, so then we have the blue collar ones. I can relate to this real easy, but my dad was a blue collar worker. He was a mechanic. So every day when he went to work, the very first thing he did is got his blue coveralls he put on. Those are the people that get their fingers banged with hammers and wrenches and all that stuff there. And it's the crafts and trades. Again, any kind of job that you could think of that would be required to maintain a small city, we probably have. Their system is a little bit different. So they'll normally have a prefix of WG, which is a great wage grade. They'll still have the 4-digit code for whatever their job is. And again, you can go out to OPM, plug that in, and it'll give you a job description of it as a general macro perspective there. In this case here, I know some of them are highlighted, and this is just an older slide. Bottom line is for Allison Air Force Base and most of the Department of Defense, all wage grade positions are direct hire, which is really neat. So how do they get paid? Well, they have their own pay scale, and it's a little bit different. So the GS, for us in Alaska, you have the normal GS pay schedule that applies to the CONUS, the lower 48. However, because the cost of living up here is higher, we have the base pay plus locality pay, which is about 28%. So that slide that I showed you before, what you see is what you get because it factors in the locality pay. And then you also get COLA, cost of living allowance, on top of that. That wasn't reflected in the hourly rate, but it's about 3%, and that is not taxable. So with that in mind there, that's how the GS works. For the wage graders, though, we do a survey every 2 years for the local market and say, what's the going rate for plumbers or crafts and trades kind of people? And we update this. So in this case here, typically as a plumber, a full-fledged plumber is going to come out at a wage grade 10. So if he's just a worker, he's going to be a WG 10, and he'll start out, or she'll start out at $33 an hour. And every year they will sit there and get a pay increase. You might sit there and say, well, what happens after the 5th year? By that time, this chart's updated here, and they'll start reset, so to speak. So that's if they're just a worker. However, they may be in charge of a crew. So they run a crew of plumbers. In this case here, so they're a WL, a leader, and so they'll use this pay scale. Or they may be a supervisor, meaning that they're hiring, firing, counseling, appraising, recognizing all those kinds of things that supervisor does. In that case, they're going to do a WS. Same principle. But that's how that works there. All right. Okay. But for us, it's more than just a pay strip. Obviously, the federal government offers a pretty competitive salary. Matter of fact, I did a labor market analysis for this area, the interior of Alaska, 2 years ago. So a year ago, April of 18. Anyways, I evaluated every single one of the positions that we have out at Eielson to the local labor market. And I found out about 63% of our jobs when you're first starting out are above the local market. So that's step one. However, when you go to step two, 97% of our jobs are above the local market. That's really good. And how many jobs can you get off the non-government, if you would, that's going to have this automatic pay increase every year? Not very many. Along with that, though, we have a number of opportunities to entice you to be part of the team. One of which is, this is the second one, there's probably relative to you guys there, student loan repayment. I have the opportunity that if you wanted to have that as part of an incentive to take one of our jobs, I can pay up to 10% of your base pay for 5 years toward your student loans. Along with that, we have a number of incentives outside that one. One is so we have a permit change of station. That's what we call PCS. So the government, we have some jobs out there that are essentially funded by our headquarters down in San Antonio. Those are typically GS 11 and above, and so they pay a PCS. However, we may have some jobs that fall outside that realm that are still critical to Eielson. And in that case there, we, the wing, can pay for a PCS for you to come or go wherever to come here. Along with that, usually if we hire someone for the lower 48 and come up here and give them a paid PCS, that means when they're done with their transportation agreement, which is typically 3 years, we're obligated to pay their way back to wherever they came from. So that's what a PCS does. We also have the alternative for a relocation incentive. So that's not a PCS. It may be someone from Oklahoma City or whatever that wants to come up here. We're not willing to go so far as giving you PCS for us is $50,000 to $80,000 each way. So we may not be willing to commit that much money to fill this position here. However, I might be able to be willing to at least pay your way up here. So again, for a relocation incentive, I could offer up to 50% of your base pay to relocate it. Typically what happens is if you tell me you're from Oklahoma City, I have a website, I plug in Oklahoma City, and I figure out what the going rate is for a family of 4 to be packed up in a pod, the pod shipped up here. So maybe it's $18,000, which is probably right. And then I'll add 10 grand onto it to accommodate all your travel arrangements and your initial expenses when you get here. So I'm going to offer you a relocation incentive for $28,000. So, and the agreement on that, when we do that, is you're making a commitment for typically 3 years to work with the Department of Defense. So you don't even have to stay at Eielson. You could go take a job over at Wainwright or another military installation. And in some cases, depending on the incentive, it could be just the federal government as a whole, anywhere. So, we have that's the relocation. The recruitment, again, I can go up to 50% of your base pay. Right now, we're recruiting a pilot, a civilian pilot for our F-16s. Obviously, our pay, it's going to be a GS-13, which is about $150,000 a year. And that's probably not going to be enough to entice that pilot to not take that commercial pilot job of $200K a year. So I may give him some incentive there, a signing bonus, if you would, for recruiting, and give him up to 50% of his base pay. So that's a recruiting incentive there. And then retention. So maybe you're already a current employee, and God forbid we have some people that are headhunting you, and you come to us and you say, hey, BP has offered me whatever. We can give you a retention incentive, again, up to 50% of your base pay. You make a service agreement with us, and every year we renew that. So we revisit. If you're actively being headhunted, then we'll continue with that retention bonus. If you're not being actively recruited, then we may do away with the retention incentive. It's all a judgment call, but all those things are there. Along with that, when we do our annual appraisals, we have cash awards and time off awards that go with it, which can be all the way up to 10% of your base pay. Leaving workplace flexibilities there, we have a bunch of AWS, alternate work schedules. So working 410s or a 549, doing telework, those are all options. Obviously, if you're a receptionist, it's pretty hard to telework, so you wouldn't be eligible for that. However, maybe you're an engineer and all you're doing is data crunching or working projects from a CAD system or whatever the case may be, telework might be an option. So all that's there. Vacation time, personal time, sick time. When you first start out, with all the paid holidays, the sick time and all of that, it's about 26 days a year. So which is pretty good. And like I said, telework there. All these other things are opportunities for you. They're not all carte blanche. Matter of fact, every employee is going to get it. Some of them are hard and fast, and some of them are negotiable. That's an operative word too, is negotiable, and you'll see why. We also say that our jobs are not just jobs, they're careers. We really want to bring you into the fold and have a long enduring relationship to have a career. And this is just symbolic. For every one of those 4-digit job series out there, there's a career field manager, and he's worked or she's worked with all the different parts of the Air Force. So this is our flight path, if you would, for someone coming into this career field at the entry level, and what kind of training they would have and what grade they would be, all the way up to them becoming a general officer equivalent. So again, we want that long-term relationship. As far as our recruiting goes here, so by law, remember I said OPM is codified in law, what we have to do as far as recruiting goes. By law, our first stop for recruiting all positions there is our internal federal employees. We have to give them an opportunity to compete for further promotions or whatever the case may be. That's by law. If for some reason we can't fill a position, then we can reach into all these other different buckets here of kinds of people to come up with more applicants. In our case here, because Eielson Air Force Base actually Alaska is hard to fill, we use all of the above. And we're going to talk about some of these individually here later on. Along with that, we may really get desperate and say, OPM, instead of our Air Force personnel system going out in the USA Jobs and putting a posting there, please post one there for all of the federal government and give us a certificate list, and we get this list right here. That list is actually going to have 3 categories of people on it. One is going to be what we call your 30% vets. So they've got a 30% disability rating or higher. Or the next group is those people that have less than that 30% rating. And then it's the third category is the general public or all others. The unique thing about this one, and we try not to do this, is because if we get this list and there's a 30% vet, we have no option but to select that person. You don't even get to interview them. We have to select them. And the only deviation around that is if we are able to disprove their qualifications. Maybe they embellish their resume or whatever the case may be, but we're forced to take them. And I basically have to talk to God and country to overturn that. It took me 6 months to do one. So anyways, and then we have all these here, and we'll talk about those. All righty. So do we have any military spouses? Okay, quick slide. So one of the things that the federal government would love is for about 10% of its workforce to be individuals with disability. And even more specifically, they'd love for about 2% of its workforce to be individuals with targeted disability. Yes?
What if you're like almost a military spouse? Can you go back?
Okay. Okay. That's all right. So let me finish this slide and I'll go back. Is that fair? I apologize. All right. So in this case here, individuals with disability, these targeted ones, so they have special preference, special rules that they can be considered for federal job opportunities here. It's almost like direct hire. It is direct hire. It's just under a different reason or cause. So in this case here, a person with disability can look at those two lists that I gave you. And if they think they're qualified for any of those jobs, they can apply, submit a package, whether we solicit you to or you choose to do it. And we'll talk about the process here in a second. But the only thing I wanted to emphasize is you give me a package, we're going to screen you for qualification. We're going to give it to the selecting official or the manager. They're going to determine whether to hire you or not. And really, if we screen you for whether you're qualified or not, they already know that you're qualified. The question is, do they have good reason to decline selecting you? And an answer like, well, I'd rather see Jim Bob in that because that's the buddy that they're looking for, is wrong. Or anything like that. Now, if they interview you or contact your references and find out, hey, they got poor performance, employment history or whatever the case may be, they're fired the last 2 jobs, all those things, those are all good reasons to not select someone. But just because they're looking for Jim Bob versus this person that came through the hoops here is an unacceptable answer. So in this case here, then we're going to offer you, it'll come back to us. We'll reach out to you and say, hey, we're pursuing this process here. You may need more information. At that point, you are then going to get a tentative job offer. And this is extremely important for this one here. So at this point, no one knows that you're disabled. All they know is you have your resume, and they've screened you for your qualifications, and based on your qualifications, they've selected you. And then you're going to get the job offer, and that's going to be by email. And in that email there, it's going to tell you that you've been selected for this position here and this pay rate, and blah, 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 blah. And oh, by the way, you have 48 hours, not 2 business days, 48 hours to respond. And you got three responses: accept, decline, or other. In this case here, if you're a person that is disabled, whatever it is, and you need some kind of reasonable accommodation, you're blind, and you're going to be hired as, I don't care, a clerk, and so you need special computer equipment. So in that case there, you're going to say, in other, you're going to say, I accept the job offer, however, I need reasonable accommodation for my visual impairment. At that point there, you're going to be working with one of my staff who will negotiate what that accommodation is. So, and we intentionally leave it there so it does not taint the selection process, right? So no one can ask you if you're disabled or anything like that. Okay. All right. So that's just an overview of that. And now let's go back to the military spouse. So on the military spouse, here's the bottom line. So they want the military spouse to have an opportunity for a job when they accompany their spouse. So in this case here, first off, while you have the status, you are treated like an internal employee. So all your job announcements, when it says open to public or open to internal, you are going to be considered internal. Secondly, when you get it, so I've got 2 scenarios. One is you're here and your PCS into another base. In that case there, you're going to be on the guy's or the spouse's orders. The other option is a person comes up here, if you would. They're single and then they get married, and that spouse now is not in their orders, but they can prove that, hey, they're a military spouse. Both scenarios, they're eligible for a military spouse preference. With that in mind there, you're going to submit an application just like everybody else, whatever the means is, and you're going to attach some special documents. There's a checklist and everything, and basically certifying that you're a military spouse, what have you. And then let's just go through the process real quick. So our obligation for a military spouse is to offer you eventually, hopefully if you're qualified, is a full-time position. Whether it is in the GS world or WG world, or I got another world on base too, it's called non-appropriated. Those are work with like the clubs and the theaters and the bowling centers and all that. If either one of those entities offer you a full-time job, you either accept or you decline. You've used your military spouse preference, right? And let's just say this side over here offers you a full-time job, and now you want to apply for another job over here, because it's the real world, the GS world, so to speak. You still have military spouse preference in terms of you're treated like an internal employee over in this different system. So that's the only difference there. But when you're doing that, you're not given preference. How the preference works here is this. So I may have 100 people that apply for a job, not in Alaska, but maybe down in the lower 48. 100 people apply for the job. The folks, whether it's the computer or somebody on the other end of the computer, they screen you for qualifications. And eventually the selecting official is only going to get a list of 30 people. But let's just assume that there is 100 people that apply, 50 of them are deemed qualified. How do I decide those 50, of those 50, what 30 are going to go on that list? If you are a military spouse and you are part of that 50, you will automatically be put in that list. And that list is considered one of the best qualified. So in that case there, if you are among the best qualified, those 30, then we have to select you. We don't even get to talk to you. All we get to do is see your resume. And again, if we have suspicions as far as your qualifications, we can challenge that. If there are 2 or more spouses on the list, then we finally get to talk to you. All right, but also keep in mind, there may be a scenario, and we just had this recently, a couple weeks ago. I get a list, I have 1 military spouse, and then there's only 10 on the list, and I have 9 30% vets. They're on the list. That's all that's on the list. No other kinds of people, no current employees, no one there. So I have those 10. Both groups, the military person and the spouse, all have preference. So in this case here, I can't talk to the spouse. I can't talk to these other 9 and interview them and all that, and I can choose one of the 10. So that's it. It's those kind of rules I deal with there. But that's the military spouse thing. If you have more questions, we can talk that afterwards, okay? All right. So individual with disability, we got that. 30% of that, that's all I'm saying is someone was in the military, and when they left the military, however that was, they retired or separated, somehow the Veterans Administration gave them a rating as far as their disability compensation. So it's 30% better. In this case here, those folks are going to put together a package and submit it, hopefully with one of our jobs. As far as the direct hire goes, it's real easy. I give you these lists, however you get them, or you find one out on USA Jobs, and you're going to build a resume package, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. The DD-214 basically says that's their military service record. Their VA rating that says they are a 30% vet, and anything else that they feel is warranted to support that job. They simply are going to give it to me one of 3 ways. They're either going to email it to me, snail mail it, or hand deliver it. And you notice I didn't say a cover page? We don't want a cover page. You don't need a cover page. All you need is an email that says, I would like to be considered for these 3 jobs on your vacancy list as a 30% vet, and attach the documents. And we take it from there. That's all I need. I don't need a cover page. So those are the 3 ways there. We will go through the qualification screening. If you are qualified, we'll push it to the selecting official, and I typically give them 5 days to respond. And again, we've already deemed them qualified, so the question is, from the selecting official, why would we not select this person? We've been given that direct hire authority because we are so hard to fill here. You have a qualified candidate. Give me a good reason why we should not select. In this case here, they choose to select it, and again, we will go back to that person, collect any other additional documentation, and push the package forward to our San Antonio office, where they will issue that tentative job offer, and we'll go from there. Okay. So all this does is say that all of the same thing as far as direct hires, but I got 3 kinds of direct hires, because I've got these Schedule A folks over here. Those are the individuals with disability. I've got those 30% vets. And oh, by the way, I have jobs out there that are open to the general public for direct hire. In all cases, the process is the same. Some of the supporting documents may be a little bit different. So, questions on it? Lots of opportunity there. Okay, one of the things that happens when we get the package, we're going to send you an email like this. It basically says, you emailed it to us there, we got it. We're sending emails and letting you know it did not go into a black hole. All right, we actually have it, and we're doing it. And when it moves from us, because we screened you for qualifications, from us to the selecting official, you get a similar one. And when it comes back from the selecting official to select, you're going to get a similar one. And again, it's just reassurance that we haven't forgot about you. All right, we actually are doing something with it. Be patient, what have you. Please note that these emails are not job offers. All it's saying is continuing with the process. The only people that can give you a job offer is our San Antonio office. Right. Okay. So now let's talk interns. So I gave you this little packet here. So when you look at this folder here, I would like you to look at it so you're seeing this, be amazing. And then if you would, just open it up just like that. So I have a number of intern programs. So on the intern programs, the first one I'm going to talk about is over here in the top right. So if you notice, the title here is Premier College Intern Program. So if you were to go to USA Jobs and plug in those keywords, these opportunities are coming. We have them at Eielson. We have them all over the Air Force. But in this case here, typically we are targeting people that are obviously going to college, and they're in that sophomore to junior year, junior to senior year. And we want you to come work for us during the summer for 10 to 12 weeks. You're hired just like a normal employee. You have paycheck, benefits, all of that kind of stuff there for that summertime employment. Then somewhere in February of your senior year, you're going to get an email that says, congratulations, you completed that internship program, and now we'd like to offer you one of these over here, the Palace Acquire, the Copper Cap, whatever the case, or the STEM ones, all those. And how that works there is generally speaking, and we're going to go into this a little bit more in detail. Generally speaking, a person with a bachelor's degree, the highest grade I can give them if they had no job experience is a GS7. My engineer positions are a GS12. So how do I get there? One of them is this intern program, because I can hire them as a GS7 into the intern program, and it's a 3-year program. So a year after they're there, they're going to get promoted to a GS9. Then a year later, a GS11. And a year later, they'll be able to fully qualify and be eligible to be put permanently placed in that GS12 position. Again, that's a full-time position, paid benefits, blah, 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 blah. So that's an opportunity there. The other one is this one here up at the top left. So this is for recent grads or post-secondary school. Right now, I have 4 allocations for Eielson Air Force Base. How this works here is if an individual has recently graduated from whatever kind of program, it could be a vocational program or an academic program, or the best scenario for us here to demonstrate everything is we have someone who graduates with a bachelor's here this come May, and they are opting to go on to their master's. So I can hire them into our permanent position as graduating with their bachelor's there, and they're going to be in a permanent position, and so the next 2 years they're going to be completing their master's degree, which is typically what, 1 or 2 classes a semester, right? So what this is going to afford them to do is use actual on-duty time if you would to go to school. So you got 40 hours a week there, you know, six hours of that's going to be in the classroom up here at UAF or whatever the case may be. And maybe you're attending some of the schools through on base at the Base Training Education Center, but you're paid while you're going to school. And then at the end of your 2 years or whatever your degree program is there, then we actually give you a full promotion to the full grade of that position there, and you're in a permanent status. So that's a great program there. Okay, so a recent graduate for us is there's 2 definitions. So within 2 years, so if you graduate, let's just say you graduated with a bachelor's degree, as long as you're in it 2 years from that that date there, you're eligible for a recent graduate thing, which is the same program. All that does in that case there gives me direct hire authority to hire someone into that position. It won't be because you're going to school, because it's a combined authority, secondary students or recent grad. Recent grad, I'm just plugging you into the position based on that special authority, and you're full up. Post-secondary means you're pursuing a further education, and you're going in that. So those are all great opportunities there. You ready? And if you got more questions, works fair enough. All right. So that's our internship program. Okay, lost one. Apologize. This just is kind of a summary of give you an idea of where we are looking for these here, and that's not hard and fast. Those are generally what kind of job opportunities for interns we have there. Go for that. If you are interested in these jobs, any one of those programs, there's basically 3 keywords that you want to look. So USA job used in the Premier college student or trainee. Those 3 things. Premier, college, premier, student, or trainee. Any one of those opportunities will come out there. I do want to say this one thing, because I have, or I did have an intern in my office. The great thing, at the end of his 3 years, so this is Jack there. So had he completed his program here, and I'm ready to put him in his permanent position, he could call up the intern program manager and say, hey, where's the other vacancies around the world for graduating interns? And they give him a list there, and he comes to me and says, Howard, thank you very much for your 3 years of mentorship there, but I'm going to go to Australia. and the Air Force moves them to Australia into a permanent position. So, yes, you like that, huh?
I studied abroad in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that is a great opportunity as far as that goes. I mean, the Air Force has 80 installations, major installations throughout the world. So, anyways, so one of the things that we have, and this we're very unique to other bases, we have our own website. This website is allisonjobs.com. It is one page. It is not going to take you anywhere else. Its primary purpose in life here is to give a central location for people to go out and find our current vacancy list. Remember I said I kind of got 3 different groups here. I got those folks that work for the club and the theater and all that. That's these jobs here. You click on that, and it'll bring up that vacancy list. And if you click on this, NAF jobs is no longer, they're using USA jobs for it. But when you click on it, it'll automatically filter Eielson Air Force Base for those jobs. In contrast, we have this one. The traditional list, that's the ones that we are going to publish on USA Jobs. So that's the one list I gave you that's got a header on a traditional list. And then the other one is the local direct hire vacancy list. That's the ones that we can do 3 ways, right? USA Jobs or snail mail or email, or whatever the case may be. Something to note, it says follow guidance under special hiring authority below. So if you're applying as a military spouse preference, you can click on this and something like this will show up. This one happens to be for the 30% vet. And it lists all the documents that you should include in your package, including sample letters. Like an example is the individual with disability. Maybe they don't have a letter that certifies that they qualify as an individual with disability. There's a sample letter, then they can take it to the medical provider, the voc rehab, any of those kind of entities, and generate that letter for us. So, and also our slides, that you're seeing here are on this page at the very top. So along with that, we have all of our current pay scales down here. All right. All right. Okay, so let's finally talk about USA Jobs. So first and foremost, you want to establish an account with USA Jobs. It does a number of things for you. I'm going to walk you through these real quickly. First, it's going to allow you to do these. Obviously, search. You can go up there to the location, plug in a zip code, a city, whatever. It'll list all the federal jobs posted for that particular area. Or you can plug in keywords like trainee, college, intern, blah, blah, blah. It'll generate those. Or you can have a combination thereof. I currently have a search that produces a list of all the vacancies for Eielson Air Force Base that have published. And once a week, I get an email. So you can do the search, or you can save it, and you can also tell your profile to send you notices. So if you're interested in a librarian position there, you can do your search, save your search, and then program it that says every time there's a librarian position posted anywhere in the federal government to send you an email. All right. And what you get is something like this. So this is kind of an example of my weekly one there. So it lists the job. This header is hyperlinked straight to USA Jobs. You can click on that. It'll give you all this information here about it. The things I wanted to point out on it is, one, who can apply. So this may be where it says public, open to public, or internal only, whatever the case may be. It'll also tell you the number of vacancies and the locations. So this one says 1 vacancy, Eielson Air Force Base. There are some out there that say multiple locations. Like IT is a good one. We have lots of postings out there. And the rating might sit there and say, this one has a very specific rating. It may say GS5 to GS15. That just means, hey, we want any and everybody that's an IT person to apply here. And we'll use that as kind of a clearinghouse for those people that are interested in those jobs. Most important piece out of this, the whole thing there, though, is this open period. So it's saying it posted on this day and it's closing on that day. And when it closes, it's East Coast time. So, all right. So USA Jobs obviously will also help you actually see the jobs you applied for, the ones that you're interested in but haven't applied for, and your searches. So let's talk about qualifications. This is extremely important. This is how you leverage your opportunity to get a job. If we're screening you for qualifications and it was solely on education, you went from high school to UAF, got your degree, had no jobs, no experience, whatever. Now you're applying for one of our jobs. This is a chart that comes from OPM, and it says, based on this here, the most I can give a person with a bachelor's is a GS7, master's is a GS9, blah, blah, blah. That's the most I could do. That's not typical for people that are applying for jobs. Usually we have people that have some kind of experience. So we get into other factors there. So every job posting has, when you click on it, it'll have this area here, basic qualifications, knowledge, skills, and ability. And our job here is to leverage your knowledge, skills, and abilities against this job announcement, right? So we have to be really attentive to this. So this one happens to be for our club. And so it's a GS11 position there. And I'm just going to read a segment of here. And so up at the top, it says qualifications. And it says it basically has to meet OPM qualifications. This is the basic requirement. Club manager, degree, bachelor's degree or higher from the accredited institution, blah, blah, blah. And then in addition to that, it says specialized experience. So club applicant must have at least 1 year of specialized experience at the next lower grade, which in this case was GS9. So that's really important. It goes on to say that or education or a combination of education and experience. So that may be there. Along with that, here's your knowledge, skills, and ability. And down at the bottom, this is really important, is here's part-time and unpaid experience and volunteer experience. So let me just put this in perspective here. You want enough meat in your resume to get you that 1 year experience, specialized experience. How much is a year? 2,080 hours. That's what we want to get. Let me put this in perspective. So my resume right now in USA Jobs, and I do strongly encourage you to use USA Jobs. Let me back up. Our folks here and our folks at other employment agencies do a very good job of teaching people how to do a 1 or 2 page resume with a nice cover page. That works great for non-federal entities. It will not get you a job with the federal government unless you're some kind of scientist or rocket scientist or whatever, and a 2 or 3 page VITA works, and that's fine. But generally speaking, it's not going to get you a job. We want you to use USA Jobs because it's one, it's automatic, it's an autofill kind of thing there, and it asks very important questions as you go through it, especially on the back side, especially for folks that are veterans or veteran spouses and all of that. It asks you about campaigns and are you a Purple Heart recipient and all those things. And each one of the answer to each one of those opens up the aperture for opportunity or preference. So in my case, my current resume is 11 pages long. Now let me share with you what it represents. So I've got 20 years of military experience. I've got 22 years of civilian experience in the military. I've done a lot of work here with UAF and a number of different venues. I've got over 20 years with the Lions organization doing stuff at the club level all the way up and across the globe at the international level. I have my own personal business. Okay? I also built my own house. All those things are represented in my resume, one robust resume. And my hope is, and the best example I can use is I use military spouses. One, I get a person who has accompanied their spouse over the last 20 years at 6 different bases. And for whatever reason, at every base, they get tagged in with one of the different organizations. Maybe it's the Enlisted Spouses Club, maybe it's the PTA, maybe it's the church, and they happen to be the treasurer. And so for 20 years, on an average of 10 hours a month, they perform treasurer duties. Do you think over 20 years and that 10 hours a month there, they could at least try to accrue a good chance of that 2,080 hours? Yes. Or at least a big contribution to it there. And then you piecemeal this other piece here and whatever, and you get up to 2,080 hours, and sure enough, you've met that specialized experience. That's the important thing here, is giving yourself full credit for all of your experiences, not just your academic experiences, right? Your life experiences, all right? So we don't need a piece of paper to prove that you have the experience. Obviously, you need to be honest in what you represent, but yeah. So that's what you need to do in your resumes, is be very specific on it. Let me just share with you an example. So I have an individual, a personal friend, who wanted to be a welder. He was a welder off base, 25 years, 5 different jobs. I mean, he was the coup de grace as far as a welder goes. But he was hardcore blue collar. He was not tech frenzy. He had an iPhone, and the best he could do is dial a phone number on it. He couldn't even text on it. That's the kind of guy he is. Thank God his wife was an ultrasound tech. But she is off base, and he's asked her to help him with a resume. So she does what's a custom off base, helps him develop that 1 or 2 page resume with a cover letter. So she's having to pull all this information from him, bless her heart. If you take the name and employment objective off and the reference and all those kinds of things off, this is what they gave us. consider for being a welder. And you would think on the surface, well, okay, he's been a welder, he's qualified. That is not enough to qualify for a person for a federal job. How do we get them there? And so these two individuals actually sat in a seminar just like yourselves. And we went through the same thing, different scenario, but this is what I told them. I says, for each one of those 5 jobs that you have, go out there and ask yourself, when you were hired for the job, what were the specific responsibilities you were hired to do? You know, by the way, you know when you go into a job and you got hired for these 5 tasks or whatever, and then they throw all this other crap at you? So those are the actual responsibilities, the tasks that you did, so you add those to it. And then typically, if for every job you have, there's something out there that there's a problem that no one wants to touch with their 10-foot pole, but you take it on, you tackle it, you solve world hunger, whatever the case may be. So there's something for you to brag about. So you take each one of those jobs and do that for it. Be very explicit and always include current contact information and hours per month, because we want that 2,080 hours, right? Do that. So in this case here, for each one of the 5 jobs that this welder had, he did that, and this is just one example. So we took that little skimpy half-page resume they did, and we turned it into this, which ended up being like, I want to say 7 or 8 pages. I have beef now. I have lots of beef to gauge their qualifications against what? The knowledge, skills, and abilities that are on the job announcement. So that's what I do. And even in this case here, he doesn't know what he got hired for there. He can go out and Google, what's the typical job description for a welder or a fabricator or whatever the case may be, and it gives him a starting point. Ready? So this is just another way to beat the dead horse here. None of you are military, so I'm not going to talk about that there. But in this case here, don't be afraid to repeat yourself. Again, my military example is I have a person 20 years in, been a crew chief at 6 different bases. The inclination is to list one job from their starting point of their 20 years to their ending point and list it as crew chief. And I tell them that's the biggest mistake you could make there. Again, going back to our previous slide, you were hired for these particular responsibilities, but then you had all these other tasks thrown on top of you. Every single one of those jobs at each one of those 6 bases were slightly different. So we tell those folks, hey, this is your general job description for whatever this one is, power production. Cut and paste that into Word 6 times with the to and from dates and the supervisor's contact information and all of that. And then go back and ask yourself, okay, out of all of this general one here, what are the things I didn't do? Line those out, delete those, and then add all those extra tasks, the additional duties. I was the pubs monitor. I was the fire safety guy. I was whatever. Add that up there, and sure enough, you got 6 very distinct job experiences, yet they're overlapping. They're all crew chief. So do that, but always include that. Is this helpful? Yeah. Okay, this is one example of one of the entries in my resume. So the one thing I want to stress here is USA Jobs Resume Builder, for this block, you can have 5,000 characters. 5,000 characters is a lot. That's a half page in this system. So use it. Again, leverage your knowledge, skills, and abilities so you can leverage your opportunities to get that job. All right, so standard documents here. This is just kind of a typical thing as far as applying goes, your resume, transcripts. If you are applying for a job, maybe it's equipment operator, you need a CDL, or you're a nurse and you need your list or whatever. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Okay, I got you. I'm tracking. So here's the case. So when you apply for your job, whether it is in person, snail mail, or online, so someone is going to screen them for qualifications. The very first thing I'm going to do, if I get a package, is I'm going to go up to OPM, pull down the qualifications, and I'm going to verify that that person's resume meets those qualifications. The next thing I'm going to do is pull down the position description for that specific job, and it's got knowledge, skills, and ability. And I'm going to be looking for your resume to speak to those knowledge, skills, and ability. All right. It doesn't have to be straight one for one, exact verbiage or whatever. Instead of a, I don't care, military personnel system there, you have a personnel system, whatever. That'd be the case. So we're going to screen that. But let's go back to my scenario of 100 people applied, 50 were qualified. How many are going to be on the cert list? 30. So now I've got to pull out or filter out 20 of them. How do I do that? So they all met the keyword search to get the KSAs, but maybe this one over here used those keywords more frequently. So they score higher and they end up being in the 30 versus the 20 that are left out. So that's what you want to do. Also, something to note here is you do not want to ask one of us. Well, first off, let me tell you what my office cannot do. I cannot tell you what job to apply for. I cannot look at your resume and say, this is what you need to do on the resume for this particular job. There are other entities to do that, especially if you're going to be associated with the military. On base, both they have facilities for that. It's just a prohibited personnel practice by law. I cannot do that. I cannot give anyone an unfair advantage to the general public for competing a job. Some people like to call us up and say, hey, can I get the position description for this job or this vacancy? I can't even do that. All right. The best I could give you is the knowledge, skills, and ability, the same ones that are going to get posted to USA Jobs if it gets posted there. So let's just say that you have a list, you have a position on my vacancy list that's not going to get posted to USA Jobs. It's one of the direct hire ones. How do you find out the knowledge, skills, and abilities? Plug in that duty title into USA Jobs, and some other base will probably have it, and you'll get a good description. So that's all the cases there. Does that help you? Okay. Go ahead. Nope, go ahead. Yeah. I will tell you, people who somehow get the position description and then cut and paste it into a resume are not likely to get selected. And the reason is because there's no real meat. That just means someone who's very good at cut and paste in Word. Yeah. Well, okay, that's a great question. A lot of people they find a job out there, it pops up and says, I'm really interested. It closes on Sunday, but I'm going to tweak my resume. I'm not in favor of that. I'm in favor of you having one very comprehensive, robust resume. Because as the selecting official, I described to you what my resume looks like there. All right, could they care less about me building my own home and running a Bobcat and laying concrete and all that when I'm applying for an HR job? No. But they'll open up the resume and they'll flip through all your job experiences there and they filter it. And if there's something that may potentially have an overlap skill set, then they'll pay attention to it. But if it's, he's not applying for equipment operator or carpenter position, so I'm going to skip over this built own home kind of deal there. Whatever. Have one resume. Have one. And the reason is, here's the best advantage. Because when that link comes up that says, here's a job posting right now, and it's already sparked your interest, when should you apply? Right now. Don't wait till Sunday when it closes. Ready? That's the main benefit. As well as that, typically when people see a very robust resume, that means someone has invested an inordinate amount of time into creating this resume rather than just something tailored for a specific position. And maybe there is a parallel skill set there to that mission set is that those guys are trying to fill for. This welder, the guy, yeah, he was a welder. Then when he worked in the snow barn, he became a fabricator, all because of his associated skill sets that were not directly related to being a welder, but the value he brought to that shop's mission set. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am. I wouldn't say that, but go ahead.
Well, compared to some places in the lower 48.
Yes. Atlanta gets typically 125. I get 10.
Yeah, exactly. So when coming out of college, I was always told to make nice to the point because you're not going to reach.
That'd be for the off-base folks. Okay. Because your first milestone is what? Getting through the gate, the threshold of being determined qualified and making the list. And trust me, the selecting officials, once they get the list, they'll go through your resumes. Okay, and they filter it. First off, I'll just give you some helpful hints. Most federal government selecting officials, especially for your lower grade, so if you're not like a general officer equivalent or working for the White House or something like that, they're going to go through the list and they'll filter through the resumes and not even bother with an interview. You know how people are really uncomfortable about doing performance feedback sessions? For whatever reason, interviews are the same way. We're trying to get them to do more and more interviews, primarily because, especially with people that have gotten burnt, meaning they went off the list and for whatever it turned out to be a bad apple. Do that 2 or 3 times and now they're going to say, yeah, I definitely want to talk to these guys and see if they're really talking some smack or what. So in this case here, when they do that, then they're likely going to do panel interviews. So 2 or 3 people. That works really well. So I have all your contact information there. So that'd be very helpful. I got like 3 minutes left here. So I'm trying
Howard, real quick, I know I'm interrupting your presentation, but I just want to make that point that you said online too, that what he's talking about, this is for government USA jobs. If you try to give me a 13-page resume in a civilian job, I'm not going to read it. So that's a really good point. I just wanted to make sure that was repeated for the folks online.
Yeah. And job with the federal government, whether it's the Air Force, some other branch or entity or agency or whatever the case may be. Yeah, it works fine off base or if you would outside that, but not in this case here. I just want to reiterate, when you get these notices here, don't procrastinate. Don't wait till Sunday night, an hour before the deadline to submit your thing and come to find out the web's down, the internet's down, the system won't accept your file, whatever the case may be. Go back to that same reason. Have a nice, robust, ready to go resume. And when you first get that announcement, click it. All right. Deadlines, again, are always Eastern Standard Time here. In your direct hires, you can apply, be there a second. Your direct hires, you can apply either online or in person or through snail mail, whatever. Yes, ma'am.
Putting down I built my house from the ground up 1 year.
What's the job title? Constructed a house, personal home. And I listed every single thing I did, be it carpentry, plumbing, electrical, heavy equipment operator, cement, everything. Planning, designing, organizing, and a lot of jobs require just that. Planning, organizing, executing, all that stuff there. So this may be my way of getting credit for those 2,080 hours for that skill set. Even though, I'm not planning and organizing a class like this, but I am planning on organizing a major project. Cool? All right. All right. So this is just an overall summary of the process. Last slide. So you apply, the resume goes out and is pre-screened. I'm just going to give you an example of this. So if in my office, I typically would get somewhere between 5 and 10 applicants. So let's just call it 10 for sake of discussion. Out of the 10, I'm going to do up an email to all 10 and say, hey, you showed up on this certificate for this job here. And I'm very specific. I say, this is the job. Here's the pay. It's located at Allison Air Force Base, Alaska. I spell out Alaska. It's 26 miles southeast of Fairbanks, Alaska. I spell that all out there. And within 48 hours, please confirm that you want to continue to be considered for the job. Out of the 10, 5 will come back and say one of 2 things. Ooh, I thought I was applying for a job in Arkansas. Or 2, I was just trying to see if I was going to make the cert. Because somebody's bored at their job on a Friday afternoon, and they wanted to see if there's an opportunity out there. They're not serious about the job. So now I got 5. So I take those 5 there. I've run through the resumes, and I come to find out 2 of them aren't even close to being qualified for the job. Don't even know how they made the cert. So now I got 3. In those cases there, I have a matrix, a weighted matrix based on the KSAs. I score them out on paper, and then I do the interviews. When I'm done, ideally select an official. We want 3 things from them: a primary and 2 alternates. Because if they only give me a primary and they turn on the job, I have to re-announce, start the process all over again. So that's what happens here. So the select official screens them there, selects the primary and alternates. Then it's going to go to our personnel office down in San Antonio. They're going to validate, again, the qualifications and the eligibility for the person. They'll issue the job offer, and hopefully the job offer is accepted. If it isn't accepted by the primary, then it goes to the first alternate and the second alternate. Hopefully one of the 3 accepts it. Then they're going to go through the pre-employment. So, and remember, when the tentative job offer comes, you got 48 hours to respond, and you have 3 options, right? Accept, decline, or other. And if you want a student loan repayment, or if you want, because you think that you're superior qualified and far more value than that step 1 pay rate, you can ask for a higher pay rate. You can ask for relocation or recruiting or retention, all those kinds of things, or medical accommodation. All those things can be in that other. All that has to happen right here in this step. Okay. Because once you get to this step, there's no going back.
So the negotiation process.
It's right there in the pre-employment. Yep. Because we have to vet all of that and come to some kind of conclusion. And then when you are done with that, then we will send a note to our San Antonio office that says, Pre-employment is completed. Here's all the supporting documents. Issue this person a final and firm job offer with a start date. And on the start date, you show up at our office. We process you for about 2 hours, and then we hand you off to a supervisor. So that is the 60-second or the 60-minute version of this presentation. Questions? Because my time's up, right, Becca? Okay. Okay. So any questions there, I'll be glad to answer them, whether it be individually afterwards or as a group. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so from what you were saying about interviews, not necessarily a guarantee that any particular account have interviews. It's up to the.
It is up to the selecting official. Yeah. Yeah, it's not my office. It's the supervisor or the manager. They're the ones responsible for selecting them there. And they also pay the price of making poor decisions. So some of them are willing to take the risk. Yes, ma'am. Come on, throw it out there.
So there's like year-long or year on.
Probation?
Yeah, and then there's 3 years.
Okay, great question. So let me go all the way back here. So if you were going to have a career and you wanted retirement, our federal government retirement system generally is predicated on 3 things. Social Security, if it's around.